So I know a story about an older parent. Now, I'm going to get to mothers later, but I know a story about an older parent that makes me both smile and frown. It was told by a university teacher of mine, Sietse Buning. He wrote about growing up in a Dutch immigrant colony in rural Iowa just before the Second World War. So this is a long time ago. Anyways, Sietse Buning tells us that it was Opa, that means grandpa in Dutch. It was Opa Evert's 90th birthday. Opa Evert was healthy and active, and so a big celebration was called for on such an auspicious occasion. Unfortunately, rain was in the forecast, and all of Evert's kids were busy on the family farm cutting hay before the rain came. As a result, none of his kids could get over to Opa's house for a birthday visit, much less a big party. So to make up for it, one of Opa Evert's sons sent young Sietse, who was only 10 years old, sent Sietse to town. He was a grandchild of Evert, and Sietse was told to buy a Dutch book for Opa Evert's birthday, to buy it at Hessel's bookstore. Opa Evert loved to read Dutch books because Dutch was the language of his youth. And then Sietse was to go to the radio station after he bought the book and choose a birthday hymn request for Opa Evert to listen to on his 90th birthday. At the bookstore, Sietse found only 3 Dutch books left on the shelves. Unfortunately, he didn't know any Dutch himself, and so he picked one of the 3 Dutch books, Eenie, Meenie, Miny, Mo, that one. He had it wrapped up and brought it over to old Opa Evert's house. Then he dropped by the radio station, asked for his own favorite hymn to be played on Opa's birthday, and finally Sietse hurried back to the farm to help finish the haying, working late into the night. Well, all was well, until the next day, when Uncle Evert returned the book to Sietse's parents, his children, along with a note. Opa Evert said he appreciated the thought, given his 90th birthday and all, but he was returning the book all the same. You see, he wrote, at 90 years old, he just wasn't that interested anymore in reading a book with the Dutch title, A Theological Exposition of the Marriage Vows. In his note, Opa Evert also asked if there was any connection between that book on marriage vows and the song that Sietse had arranged to be sung for him on the local radio station. The song that Sietse had chosen was Yield Not to Temptation. We all of us eventually grow older. How do you like it so far? To be perfectly honest, many of us at Lawrence Park Community Church, if not all of us, many of us are protected from some of the traditional challenges of aging because we live in a country with mostly fine and affordable medical care, and most of us have financial resources to pay for some extras, and most of us, all of us perhaps, come from loving families. But we were also reminded this month, as these crosses outside of a Mississauga nursing home suggest, that all is not well in our long-term care facilities. We were especially reminded by a 322-page report from Ontario's Long-Term Care Commission. It noted that staff and residents of nursing homes were easy targets for COVID-19 because such homes have been poorly regulated and they've been neglected for years. This in spite of the fact that previous reports had warned of trouble ahead. Moreover, the situation in nursing and long-term care homes was made even worse by the province's, quote, slow and reactive response when the virus arrived. Almost 4,000 elderly Ontario residents of these homes have died in the past year. The report suggests that our elderly are simply not a priority for our society. And so we have a shortage of emergency supplies, pandemic plans, appropriately paid caregivers, and on and on. And then the report subsequently made 85 recommendations to our government. You know, by way of contrast, our scripture reading paints a lovely picture of what old age could and should be like. Here's the background. The prophet, the preacher, Zechariah, was speaking to Jews who were finally back in Jerusalem after they had been gone for 70 years. It had been an exile in the foreign land of Babylon. Anyways, the exiles came back to Jerusalem and found that their city was completely in ruins. All of Jerusalem's homes and walls and public places were still rubble or burnt to the ground, much like London or Dresden after World War II. The Jews who returned started rebuilding, but things soon ground to a halt in Jerusalem because, well, they were just too few, these returnees, and they were too poor to do much more than focus on their own survival. Rebuilding a city and putting dinner on the table, while doing both just seemed impossible to these Jews. Zechariah, though, didn't have much sympathy for this no-can-do attitude. His letter to the returned exiles is full of threats and promises, carrots and sticks, all aimed at getting the Jerusalem revitalization program back on track. Chapter 8, which we just read, is a carrot chapter. In it, Zechariah paints a picture of what a lovely new Jerusalem rebuilt is going to be like. It was a picture where boys and girls play in the streets outside of a gorgeous new temple. And says Zechariah, in this new Jerusalem, we are going to be blessed with, quote, men and women of ripe old age who will sit in the streets, each with a cane because of his or her age. Amazing. In Zechariah's New Jerusalem, happy grandparents are among the city's biggest draws. Happy opas and omas are at the center of things, sitting in places of honor at the city gate. And there the citizens of Jerusalem turn up and ask these elders for advice. That the elderly are honored and adored by everyone who passes by. Of course, the world has changed, and no one sits by city gates anymore. In fact, elderly parents and children are as like to be separated by half a dozen provinces as they are to be living in the same town. But still, Zechariah's vision for what it means to be elderly is lovely. The elderly rule with wisdom, justice, compassion, and they set the city's direction. They are magnets for children who play. Why? Well, the best way to think of it is rooted in the fifth commandment, which states, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Honor your father and your mother. The Hebrew word for honor here is kabod, or as it is sometimes pronounced, kabod. The root of the word kabod means something like weighty, heavy. So the command means give weight, give heavy honor to your parents. But most often, the word kabod is used in the Old Testament to describe not parents who are heavy or worthy or weighty, but to describe God. And here the translation is not weightiness, but glory. as in the glory of God, the Kabod of God. You see, to the Jewish way of thinking, both parents and God are supposed to carry a lot of weight in our lives. Parents have this weight because they participate in, they share God's divine glory. Parents are God's stand-ins, surrogates. To glorify our parents is to put them at the center of our lives, as God should also be at the center of our lives. You might put it this way. In ancient Jerusalem, they didn't need a Mother's Day or a Father's Day, because really, every day was Mother's Day. It could not be otherwise, because mothers and fathers were crowned with the glory of God. Anyway, that was then. Thousands of years ago in Zechariah's dreams, and on this Mother's Day, we have a 322-page report from Ontario's Long-Term Care Commission. So, in truth, our society only rarely honors the elderly as if they embody the glory of God, and then usually only when they have a lot of money to spend. We've created a culture made up of many pockets of age-related isolation, and they're often called marketing niches. And niches are artificially isolated from each other by corporate, media-driven suggestions about what people in each niche should particularly want for themselves compared to everyone else. The music and the travel industries, Facebook ads, banks, brands, all promise the happiness we crave if only we buy what everyone else in our niche is buying from them too. I mean, crossing into an other niche, that's not often promoted. I mean, when was the last time you saw an ad on television with 70-year-olds guzzling beer on a beach round a fire? Or an ad with 20-year-olds winking at each other after taking blue pills? The messaging we're bombarded with is clear. Kids can have fun, but the elderly, well, they can have fun only with a bit of help. Over time, we tend to slowly internalize these mass media messages, often without much reflection, and so the elderly are marginalized while the younger folk get on with real life. Now, to be honest, I liked Zechariah's dreams for mothers and fathers, for glorious middle age, older age. I love that dream much more than the reality described in Ontario's Long-Term Care Commission report. Of course, things are actually more complicated than that. Zechariah's picture was, after all, merely aspirational. He wasn't describing how things really were, but how he wished they would be. And the Long-Term Care Commission report isn't painting a picture of what we will all face as we age. Many of us are protected from marginalization by loving children, or wealth, or excellent home care, and excellent medical care here in Canada. But the principle here, a shared dream that lies at both Zechariah's and the Commission's writing, as well as the dream that animates our Mother's and Father's Day celebrations, that dream is worthy. Our old growth people are glorious, and they don't deserve to be cut down or marginalized for profit. Instead, our old growth people ought to be honored, and we ought to seek their counsel and advice as the canopy under which all of society can better thrive. Look, I know that there are potential pitfalls here. Just as there is no shortage of young folk in short pants who think they know best in spite of all their inexperience, so too there is no shortage of old fools. Some of us have had to struggle too with parents who were less than honorable, who neglected us or hurt us, or worse. Some of the elderly people we know refuse to learn or are trapped in cycles of anger and blaming that they can't seem to escape. Speaking about all elderly people, as I'm trying to do in this sermon, generalizing about all elderly people is going to be inaccurate when it comes to some individuals. I get that. Still, Zechariah's dream for the elderly, his theological exposition on the role and duties of the elderly, Zechariah's dream is lovely and practical. And the dreams for a better society that inform our task force's many recommendations are also lovely and practical. And for that reason, I think even biblical. The Bible, you see, is not just about divine glory, but the Bible is also about real people living gloriously good lives. We should take that to heart, not just on Mother's Day, but always.